Ever been swept away by the emotion in a piece of classical music
Yeah.
and wondered how it's actually built?
Yeah, the architecture behind the feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So today, we're plunging into the core of classical harmony. Specifically, the diatonic world. Think of it as the foundational building blocks.
Right, drawing on insights from folks like D-r Svetослав Карагенов and Dean Запрянов.
Their work gives us a great map.
Right, so at its heart, classical harmony is really about how chords work together. We're talking within the major and minor scales you've probably heard.
Okay.
And a chord is usually, well, typically 3 or more notes stacked up with a skip in between. Musicians call them thirds.
But it's not just random stacking, is it? There's a logic.
Oh, definitely not random. It's all about their role, their function within a key, how they relate to that central kind of home base note, the tonic.
Function. Okay.
Precisely. Think of it like this. Some chords feel stable, resolved, like arriving home, that's the tonic function.
Mm-hmm.
Others create tension, a sense of needing to move somewhere, like you're waiting for the next thing. Those are mainly the dominant and subdominant functions.
Stability and instability.
Yeah. Karaganov and Zapryanov talk about the tonic and dominant as these essential partners, almost like, say, black and white. They need each other.
And the subdominant?
The subdominant adds a bit more color, maybe, to that core relationship. It offers another flavor of instability.
Got it. So our mission today really is to get a solid handle on how these basic functions operate within this diatonic system.
Yeah, it's the bedrock. Understanding this helps with understanding much more complex harmonies down the line.
Okay, where do we start? Maybe chord inversions.
Yeah.
Because the same notes don't always sound the same, right?
Exactly. It's not always the main note, the root, on the bottom.
Right.
The same 3 notes can create different sonic effects depending on which one is the lowest note, the bass note.
Okay.
If the root note's on the bottom, that's simple. Root position. If the middle note of the chord is in the bass, it's called first inversion.
And the top note.
If the top note of the original triad is in the bass, it's second inversion. You might see numbers used to indicate these, like 5 or 6 or 64.
Or figured bass numbers.
Yeah, they relate to the intervals formed above that bass note. So like a C major chord, C, E, G, C in the bass is root position. E in the bass, E, G, C, that's first inversion. See the interval from E up to C. That's a sixth, hence the 6.
Makes sense. Now, harmony is often taught using this model of a 4-voice choir, soprano, alto, tenor, bass. Why that specific setup? Is it just historical?
It's largely historical, yeah. Music evolved heavily from vocal traditions. Using these standard vocal ranges, soprano highest, then alto, tenor, bass lowest, it gives a really clear, balanced model for how different musical lines interact.
Even if it's played on instruments?
Exactly. The principles apply, and there are general guidelines like avoiding having voices cross over too much, the alto singing lower than the tenor.
Right.
And keeping the upper voices, soprano, alto, tenor, relatively close together in pitch, usually within an octave of each other.
Okay, so let's dig into those main functional chords you mentioned. Tonic, subdominant, and dominant. The T, S, and D. These are the power players.
They really are. The tonic, T, is built on the first note of the scale home bass. The subdominant S is built on the 4th note, and the dominant D on the 5th note.
1, 4, 5.
Yep. These 3 chords really define the key, the tonality. Karaganov points out that having just 2 of them can sometimes still leave things a bit ambiguous.
Interesting.
In a major key, all 3 are major chords, nice and bright. In a minor key, they're naturally minor chords.
But often that dominant sounds major in minor keys, doesn't it?
Ah, good point. Yes, composers very often use what's called the harmonic minor scale. This raises the 7th note of the scale by a half step, creating a leading tone.
Leading tone.
Yeah, it's just a half step below the tonic, and it creates a really strong pull-up to the tonic. This makes the dominant chord major, giving it a stronger push towards resolution.
And that dominant chord often gets even more punch, right? It's something about a 7th.
Absolutely. The dominant 7th chord, or D7, you just add another note, stacking another third on top of the dominant triad. So 4 notes total.
And that extra note adds.
Dissonance,
Yeah.
tension. It creates a more urgent, unstable sound that really wants to resolve back to the stability of the tonic chord. It's a stronger push than just the dominant triad alone.
And it has inversions too.
Oh, yes, just like triads. And there are some common patterns, like if you have a D7 chord in its second inversion, that's the one ending in 43, it almost always resolves to a tonic chord in first inversion, the P6. It's a very smooth connection.
Okay. Now, classical harmony sounds quite rule-based. Are there ever moments where composers just bend or break these rules.
Yes, definitely. But as Karagenov stresses, these aren't usually mistakes. They're deliberate choices, exceptions used for a specific expressive effect. They shouldn't be, littered everywhere.
Like the famous Mozart fifths.
Exactly. Parallel fifths, usually a no-no, but Mozart used them very sparingly for a reason. Also, sometimes you might see unusual doubling in the main T, S, or D chords, maybe doubling a note other than the root, perhaps on a weak beat, or if the voices are moving in opposite directions, just to make the lines flow more smoothly.
Interesting. So what about the other chords in the scale? We've done 1, 4, 5. What about, say, the chord on the second degree?
Good question. The triad on the second degree, we often call it SII. It generally has a subdominant function. In fact, often considered a stronger subdominant than the main S chord, the IV chord.
Stronger. How so?
It often leads very effectively to the dominant. In a major key, this SII chord is minor. In a minor key, it's actually diminished, a slightly harsher sound.
Diminished.
Yeah. And in minor keys, you'll often see it used in its first inversion, SIS6. And sometimes the third of the chord is doubled to avoid emphasizing the tritone interval within the diminished chord.
Okay. And the chord on the sixth degree, chord 16.
The triad on the sixth degree, S is pretty versatile. It can act as a mediant, kind of halfway between tonic and dominant subdominant, or it can function like a subdominant.
So multiple roles.
Yes, and sometimes, particularly after a dominant chord, it can feel almost like a deceptive resolution, sort of like a tonic chord but with an added color note, the sixth. Doubling is usually the root note in root position and the bass note in first inversion.
What about the third degree?
Chord 3. The triad on the third degree 3. This also functions as a mediant, but it can also act as a weaker dominant, not as strong a pull as the main D chord.
Weaker dominant, okay.
Usually its root or its third is doubled. And its first inversion, the Li-As 6 chord, can sometimes function as a kind of soft dominant, often with the bass note doubled. It's a gentler push.
And finally, the chord built on the seventh degree, the leading tone chord.
Right, the triad on the seventh degree, seventh. In major keys, and also in that harmonic minor scale we mentioned, it's a diminished triad.
Like the ticky chord in minor.
Exactly. It's most often found in first inversion, VI6, with the bass note doubled. It usually functions as a passing chord that has a dominant function, leading strongly to the tonic.
And in natural minor.
In the natural minor scale, where the seventh isn't raised, the seventh chord is actually major. It has a different feel, less pull to the tonic.
Wow. Okay, so we've kind of zipped through the main diatonic chords, how they're built, their different positions or inversions, their main jobs or functions, and even some of the more nuanced players.
Yeah, the main characters and the supporting cast.
It's really amazing how these, seemingly simple building blocks create such incredibly expressive and complex music.
It truly is. Even the simplest classical melodies, or apparently simple ones, are underpinned by these intricate relationships between chords. That constant interplay of tension and release, movement and arrival.
It makes you think, doesn't it? How these core principles, stability, instability, tension, resolution, main ideas versus supporting details, how they might play out elsewhere.
But in other art forms.
Yeah, or even just life. Like in storytelling, you have the setup, the rising action, creating instability, then the climax and resolution.
Or even in a conversation like this one, certain questions create anticipation, a need for an answer, a resolution of sorts.
That's a really fascinating thought. What creates that sense of needing more or feeling resolved in those non-musical contexts for you listening out there?
Definitely something to ponder. And for you, our listener, now that you hopefully have a bit more insight into these harmonic foundations, I really encourage you to listen actively to some classical pieces.
Try to hear these functions.
Yeah. Try to hear the pull of the dominant, the stability of the tonic, the color of the subdominant, and the other chords. You might be really surprised at how much more you notice, how much deeper your appreciation becomes.